What's up, dads? It's your boy Big Dave, back with another episode of Culture Dads, Age of Sword and Cassette. What's up, Mike?
Hey, Dave, I'm doing all right, man. Actually, I got a sneak peek at Biz Archives 5, dude, and I got to say, it was a page-turner. I took a look at it, and I was just like, checking out, like, some of the internal formatting and stuff. Like, I'm a nerd for that shit, obviously, as a publisher. It's the kind of stuff that we nerd out about. But just like reading the stories and all the stuff that's in it and everything like that, I was just like, damn, I just like lost quite a bit of time zoning in on that. So it's going to be good, man. I'm really looking forward to this one. And we haven't had a release. Imperium hasn't had a release for a little while, but we got a big one coming out next. And actually the next several books are going to be real fucking heavy hitters. And it's going to be like that kind of to the end of the year. Kind of foolishly, we got some of our slimmer volumes out earlier. Those are the ones that obviously take less time to put together and everything like that. So we're, burning the candle at both ends, trying to get all this stuff out. There's going to be some seriously awesome stuff in the second half of the year for guys. And hopefully, if we can manage it, we'll still try to get our Latin course out. That one's been on, work. It's a work in progress. It's been going on for years. Hopefully we'll get that out by the end of the year and everything. But yeah, I'm really excited about the next book, and the next several books are going to be coming out. It's really cool. We've really started to hit our stride here.
Hell yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm pumped. Man, we got the publishing scene, the underground publishing scene is like where it's at. We're like ground zero of doing awesome stuff. Like cultural, intellectual revival, the Renaissance is nigh. I fuck with it.
Oh, hell yeah. No, it's like you look around. I mean, I don't dive too deeply into like subcultures of like the mainstream subculture is a bit of an oxymoron, but the left and everything like that. But man, everything I see going on there, just looking in from the outside, it's just so sterile and boring and shitty. It's like,
yeah, what's
that guy's name? Hassan Piker or something like that? Like, this is the edgy fucking left-wing commentator of du jour. It's like, that guy's got nothing to say. Absolutely nothing. And no one will remember who he is in 10 or 15 years. Whereas what we're doing, I've said this before, but it's true. What we're doing will be studied for like a century from now, maybe more than that. It'll be studied for a long, long time. This is where the cultural vitality is. This is where the turning point is. This is where the inflection point is. This is where the interest is. And, I'm sometimes, we talked about in our conspiracy theories episode about how the right is sort of, we sort of like see agency in things maybe a little too much. We see it like everywhere and everything like that. But man, it seems to me that like there are people who are paying attention to what we're doing, like people who are in positions of authority and everything like that. And, this is going to be like a wild sort of flight of insanity here. But I mean, when I wrote that article, I think it was in November last year. The one it's called, on the Substack. It's called "The Third World is Going to Cop It." I saw not very long after that, like within a month or two, I saw mainstream like media start to like push that same narrative. Except for we were obviously celebrating it, and and they were not. They were very disturbed by it. But all of a sudden, it's like there's this groundswell of like energy talking about this particular thing, right? And then the latest article I posted on the Substack was basically talking about how there's two different like streams within wokeness. There's like the BLM like ethnic resentment side, and then there's the like tranny, disgusting like degeneracy side, and how they're kind of at odds. And then all of a sudden, it's like very shortly after that, we see you know, all this stuff with like the Supreme Court and like, you know, and race riots and everything like that in France and everything. Now, I'm not saying, obviously, I'm not saying that like my little Substack is guiding geopolitical policy or anything like that. But the fact is that like it just seems weird how things that we talk about in our sphere very soon after start to become mainstream talking points, and sometimes inverted, right? Because obviously the mainstream doesn't like what we're doing. They stand for exactly the opposite, and sometimes, but they become aware of it, right? I don't know. It just seems to me that something is happening. I don't know to what degree. It's obviously something. But yeah, this is all just to say that what's going on in our scene, whether it's the publishing scene, whether it's the wider political dissonance sphere and everything like that, there is energy here, and people are paying attention, and it's exciting. It's really exciting to be part of it.
You know, I feel the same. I think we're just a little. It could be that they're watching us, or it could be that we're just ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
But two things I noted. One of them, well, you know, for folks that follow me, know I was like one of the first guys. I'm actually like one of the first guys in the right to start talking about AI. You know what I mean? Like I was talking about AI back in 2016 and shit. You know what I mean? I've been on it. And you know, back at the time when I'm talking about, you know, automation, this is before there was like some people that would touch on or whatever because it was an issue. But I was like one of the first guys to say, like, hey, automation's gonna replace things. I talked about AI art. I was like AI music. I was like talking about this stuff, and everybody thought I was a fucking nutcase, right? Or they made fun of me and all, or what, or they just didn't have interest in it. And like now it's like everywhere, right? And then the latest thing, for folks that, you know, follow me and stuff that I talk about on my personal channels, this idea of art, you know, the kind of the ideas I'm talking about with art. And I just saw an article that like verbatim said everything that I've been saying, but the opposite. Like how it's they framed it as we can't let the hooligans of Gamergate and online racist bullies wrest control of art or something. I can't remember exactly, but it was like,
I think I saw that article actually. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was like word for word what I'm talking about, but like we can't let them do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's like this person, it was watching me and like was like, fuck, this guy's saying this thing and this makes me nervous, or it was, you know, I'm just a little ahead of the curve, right? There's you know, I think it's just really smart people, and I like to think that I'm a smart guy. Everybody knows you're a smart guy, or just have some predictive some predictive ability once in a while, because you see patterns, right? You see patterns and all that. And also I think, you know, because we're spiritual guys, we're tapped in, you know what I mean? We're tapped into the inspiration, and the inspiration lends certain knowledge to people that might not otherwise have access to. So there's that. And, you know, speaking of like with art and everything like that, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about something today that some people might be like, oh, why are they talking about that? But I think it's a cool thing. It's a cool call. What we're going to talk about today are Monster Trainer video games. And we're gonna yak about that. I got Mike to play a new indie one. And the reason I want to talk about this is, number one, it was a huge culture phenomenon back in the 90s, mid to late 90s here in the US of A and in the West. Just about every kid had Pokemon Red loaded up into their Game Boy. So it was a huge cultural phenomenon, but it also, I think that it's important to kind of not abandon the spheres of entertainment. And you guys, I'm the guy that shouts from the rooftops about this, but I think that it's not superfluous. I think that it's extremely full. Here's the deal with video games, and I've said this before. I'm going to say it 1,000 more times until I fucking die. Is that video games are the biggest medium in the world by far. They dwarf movies. They definitely dwarf publishing. They dwarf everything. Everybody under the age of 40 has significantly played video games as a big pastime for pretty much all of their life, right? If you are listening to this, I guarantee you played a hell of a lot of video games growing up. And if you didn't, then everybody you know did, right? So video games are a huge thing. People play more video games now than ever. and to abandon them and not talk about them, I think is just, it's like Matt Walsh tier conservative dumb move. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also, we talk about this. We talk about this quite a bit every time we do like a old fiction writer or a movie creator from back, especially when we hit these guys from back in the 20s and 30s and stuff. Back in those days, there was not a separation between the spheres of political thought and the guys that were creating literature, like fiction literature. There was just not this separation. The guys that were coming up with big brain ideas in policy were hanging out with H.G. Wells, were hanging out with Jules Verne. They were all hanging out, and that's not to say that those guys that wrote the old fiction were making like propaganda or purely political art. They were making cool art. They were making meaningful, fantasy art, but. The idea is that all these guys kind of mixed in between and associated together and influenced one another. And a lot of these really brilliant fiction creators have made huge impacts on political scenes, right? So the idea that there should be like this very rigid academic intellectual intelligentsia in regards to I guess like policy and all this, and that should be separated from entertainment and nerd stuff. I just think that sucks. I think the big brains that are in all spheres should mix and mingle and influence one another. And that's just the way that I see it. And so anyway, go to what we're talking about is we're going to talk about Monster Trainer video games, which were absolutely gigantic in the 90s. I'm sure you guys remember Pokemon is the biggest one, right? If you are an older millennial or younger, you probably played the original Pokemon Red or Pokemon Blue and were around for the Pokemon card game and remember these games and you probably liked those original games. Or maybe you played a couple of the sequels and then you probably got a little older and didn't play it or whatever. But if you're listening and you're a Zoomer, you probably played most of the Pokemon games. So we're going to go through and we're going to do a little bit of history on the Monster Trainer games. And I have a little bit of commentary. I made Mike go download a really cool indie Monster Trainer game that's out now called Monster Sanctuary. And he played it a little bit because Mike hasn't really played a lot of video games for a long time. So I've been, kind of sucking him into my world of entertainment and getting him back into these kinds of things. Because here's the deal is this is where I'm at, right? And I'm going to quit yakking and let Mike talk. Here's where I'm at as far as my development is. I hit a point where I rejected entertainment. You know what I mean? I stopped playing music. I stopped listening to music. It was like right around when I got really, really red pilled. And I just stopped. I stopped playing games. I stopped doing everything. I wanted nothing to do with any of it. And all I could do was suck in information to learn the truth and all this XYZ. So I went down that rabbit hole. And I was in that rabbit hole for quite a few years. Then the elections happened and XY, all this kind of development happened. During this time, I developed spiritually as well. And few years ago, I sort of hit the point where I was like, I learned everything that I pretty much need to learn. And now it's time for me to go back to who I was before this journey, at least to a certain extent. So I took everything that I learned, everything that I know now, and I've gone back into the world of things that I love, which is art and entertainment and music and literature and gaming and all XYZ. And I now have all of this knowledge that I have. And I look at the landscape completely differently now. And it has given me, it has helped me appreciate these things even more. Before I loved music and games just because I loved it, right? I didn't have, now I understand the kind of the philosophical underpinnings to why I love it and why these things are important. So, Mr. Mike, go ahead. Let me know what you're thinking and tell me about what you thought about Monster Sanctuary. And did you play the Pokemon games back in the day?
So I just want to comment on the last things that you were kind of saying there about your kind of evolution and coming back full circle here. this is a very good point. It's a very important point for us to understand, which is that politics, I mean, because our scene is political, right? It's just, that's what we're into. That's the name of the game in our sphere. But the thing is that politics is a means and it's not an end. And I think a lot of guys kind of forget that, because there's so much like doom porn out there, doom scrolling forever. I mean, I love all the guys in our scene. It's just, it's such a cool little thing that we've got going on. But I will say this as a sort of like minor critique of it, is that there's just way too much. I mean, obviously I'm the guy that likes to hand out the white pills. There's too much black pilling out there. I go on Telegram. I don't really go on Twitter anymore, but I do go on Telegram, and I scroll through, and I'm subscribed to a lot of the big guys in our scene and a lot of smaller ones too. And there's some of the bigger names out there in our thing that are just posting a lot of stuff about riots in France and all this stuff, just total degeneracy, and things are going wrong. And it's just doom, doom, doom a lot, all the time. And some of these big Telegram channels is just relentless. And it's mollifying, right? It sort of stunts your ability and will to fight back. Some of that is important. You obviously need to, you need to look reality in the face. You need to understand that some ugly shit going on out there. It needs to be opposed. But too much of that is really, it just kills your will to fight back. Politics is, like I said, it is a means and it's not an end. The whole idea is that you see what's going on, you saw what happened with COVID. It's still staggering to me. It's still a huge turning point in my thinking. And I was already red-pilled by that point. Just looking around, before that, I looked around and I've always basically been some sort of an elitist of some kind, understanding that social change happens from the top down. Spontaneous order does not arise from people just sort of deciding to, the 60s and all the social change in the 60s did not emanate from the bottom up, right? And then looking at the COVID situation was it could not have confirmed that worldview anymore, because we saw people who, before this were especially the left, seeing themselves as sort of speaking truth to power and everything like that. And then it's just they just basically, it becomes clear that, the people who supposedly are the rebels in society, the Rage Against the Machines and everything like that, started to be just the mouthpieces of power. It's fuck you, I will do what you tell me kind of thing. It's just disgusting. And normal people too, normal people who are, certainly less culpable than elites and, tastemakers and everything like that in our world. But normal people, it became clear to me that normal people could be shaped and molded into almost any shape whatsoever. Obviously, we believe that there's such a thing as human nature, but people are very, very, they're very pliable compared to what I thought. So it was a total confirmation of that worldview, right? So, okay, great. Well, you've got the right politics. You understand how things work. But then the question is, what are you going to do about it? Mm-hmm. And that's the important question. It's it's one thing to be red-pilled, but if you're red-pilled and then you just sit on your ass and you dwell, you just sit in a room, you dwell for the rest of your days. Well, that's not good to anybody. It's certainly not good for you, right? What politics is essentially is it's kind of a set of training wheels. And you pick up this worldview, you assume the worldview, you put the spectacles on, you see what things really look like. And then after a while, you have to take those training wheels off. There's a wonderful metaphor in Wittgenstein's Tractatus, which is probably my favorite of his. He only wrote basically like 2 books. One of them, his initial book, the basic idea of it is that philosophy is a lot of nonsense. It's a lot of pseudo problems that don't actually exist, and that if you just actually kind of understand, like if you have a very clear theory of language, you can basically explain how most of these like philosophical problems, like the problem of other minds and metaphysics and all these things, are just nonsense, right? It's just like verbal masturbation. This is basically the idea behind his book, right? Which, I actually I started out hating it because I love philosophy, and now I'm kind of like coming around to that view. But anyway, he has a great metaphor at the end of that book where he says basically everything that I've said in this book here is like a ladder, and you climb up the ladder, you understand the words that I've said, and then once you've done that, you throw the ladder away and you don't need it anymore, right? Which obviously, if you're writing a philosophical book about how philosophy is bullshit, that's a very apt metaphor, right? And it's the same thing with our worldview. It's the same thing with taking on our worldview. It is like a ladder that you climb up, and then once you've done that, you kind of throw it away, and then you start actually doing something with it. Now, I'm not, not telling guys to abandon everything that they believe or anything that they believe. What I'm saying is that it is a step, and it's one step, and then you got to take that next step. And one of the next steps that we need to take is, basically the next step, broadly speaking, is praxis, right? It's practical engagement in the world. It's actually, it's not going into the public square on Twitter and like arguing with people and trying to change the worldview. That is very, very ineffective praxis. The next step is to get out there and actually gain power. It's to start businesses. It's to infiltrate networks. It's to gain power, basically. And one of the ways that can manifest is by owning entertainment. This is a very, very important thing that we need to do. And, Big Dave has been tooting this horn for years now. It's very refreshing. We need to hear this. If we just keep in our like little Telegram echo chamber, it's not going to go anywhere. But if we start indie game developing companies, if we start indie publishing companies, if we start indie music labels, we're going to start to influence the broader culture. This is one of the ways that subversives have done this in the 20th century, right? It's sort of a cliche that what's it called? McCarthyism was like total bullshit, right? Like it's just this one guy being paranoid that like communists are infiltrating the State Department and blah 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 blah. Well, it turns out that even in official documents that have been released in the intervening years, that he was totally right. They were infiltrating those networks. They were getting in there. They were gaining power, and that's just one dimension of it. Another dimension of it is that these people were, they were basically subverting culture as well. They were getting control of like music labels, getting control of news agencies and publishing companies and everything like that. They have basically done what it is that we need to do. So, I'm not saying to totally disengage with politics, but you have to understand that it's only one step and that we need to take the next step. And I feel like what's going on in our little sort of like subsection of the like dissident sphere, that is the focus section that comprises, culture dads and a few things adjacent to it. I feel like we are the ones that are like basically the only ones that are really doing that the majority of what else is being put out is basically like commentary on politics and it's disposable content that like nobody's going to be like listening to or doing anything with 3 months from now, to say 3 decades from now. So yeah, we basically we need to own entertainment, and ours is the aesthetic worldview. This is something that we've discussed at length on Culture Dads before, which is that aesthetics governs our worldview, and it's a very much more honest way of going about things. A lot of people, people sort of feel the need, and this is actually one of the things that Pareto says, is that people feel the need to have a justification, like a rationalization of their worldview, when ultimately what's really going on is that people are just sort of post hoc justifying what they like. And what I mean by what they like is what they find beautiful, what makes them happy, what gives them purpose and meaning in their lives. It's nothing rational. Like, the rationalizations come later. So our side of the sphere, and not everybody in the radical right, but certainly a lot more in our side than in sort of adjacent, like, right-wing spheres, believes this, that understands that our worldview is fundamentally aesthetic. This is one of the things that, like, academic agent is really great for, right? We've talked before about, like, Giambattista Vico and the fact that basically, like, postmodernism is really a right-wing phenomenon, and they're basically saying the same thing, which is that rationalism comes later. What starts out is on a foundation of irrationalism, which is very much aesthetic. So we need to own aesthetics, basically. And the fact is that the other side, the one that does own aesthetics, the one that owns, is hegemonous over culture creation, the worldview that comes out of that politics is ugly. It is disgustingly ugly. So it's a natural fit for us to be able to dominate culture, because our worldview is beautiful. We love everything that is good and right and beautiful and true, and just that is beautiful in the world. So it's a natural fit for us to be able to do that. And it's really, really encouraging to see that culture creation is starting to emanate from our spheres. And I am really, really looking forward to seeing how things go with the game that you're developing, Dave. That's going to be so cool to see that launch when it does. But yeah, to bring it back to the idea of monster taming games, this is actually a genre that I kind of missed out on. I remember Pokemon, I don't know what it was called, like what the version of it was. The first Pokemon game came out when I was in, like, late high school, like just about to graduate. Yeah. And I remember guys talking about it and me just kind of, like, not really, just being like, Pokemon, oh, okay, sure. I've never heard of this before, and didn't really get into, like, I had a couple of friends. I'd have been about, like, 18 years old at this time, I think. What year did it come out? Do you remember, Dave?
1995 or 96.
Oh, gosh, that's way earlier than I thought. I got hold of it about 1998 or so. So anyway, yeah, I remember hearing about that. I had a couple of friends who were, like, really into it at that point, but I never really got into it. However, so it was basically something that I missed out on. Because for me, when the PlayStation 1 came out, that was kind of like the end of it for me. That was like the end of my liking video. There was a few games that came out for PlayStation 1 that I really liked, but it was really like the early titles. And then by the, like, sort of end of the life cycle of that piece of hardware, it was well and truly over for me. So I kind of missed out on this genre, and it was really cool to kind of jump in and just, like, see what it has evolved into. Like, it would be like, instead of starting out playing RPGs and, like, playing Dragon Warrior, it'd be like, jumping in and playing, like, Final Fantasy 15 or something like that.
Yeah.
But I was very pleased to find that this indie game that you recommended, Dave, the name of the game that we're playing is Monster Sanctuary. It was really cool. I really enjoyed it. I didn't get all that far through it because I'm kind of retarded now when it comes to games. I'm not that good at them anymore, like I kind of used to be. However, it was really cool. It's got a kind of pixel art style. It's a bit of a platformer. There is definitely some throwbacks in terms of the game mechanics to games I'm used to, like really much older games, like maybe Chrono Trigger. But it was a totally new genre for me. And part of the reason I didn't get too far into it is that I was just sort of, like, coming to grips with, like, the mechanics and how the game works, the party system and building up your characters and everything like that. Mm-hmm. But it was really cool, man. Like, I'll probably continue, like, I only got about, like, 10% of the way through the game, but I'll probably keep going with it, actually, after this episode. So yeah, it was really cool. Like we could dig into some of the more particulars of it, but as a sort of high level overview, yeah, it was great. Very nostalgic. The mechanics were cool. It was like nice graphics and good feel and everything. Like the music was pretty sweet. Overall, yeah, it was great. I was very impressed.
Yeah. Monster Sanctuary is actually it's kind of a standout in the genre because it's like a hybrid between your traditional turn-based monster trainer game and a platformer. And not only is it a monster trainer game, you have a team of monsters. You have 3 monsters on the board that you play at once during the battle. So you come up with these different strategies and mix and match the different monsters. And the monster art is really cool. It's not go ahead.
Sorry. Just so I'm clear on this, is this unusual for the monster taming genre to have like to have like a monster party?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, that was that was one of the things I found gave it a lot of the sort of deep strategy was that, the different monsters obviously have different attributes, and the way that they work in the battle system, like it matters who goes first. It matters like what elements that they're strong on. It matters what their stats are. It matters what their buffs and debuffs are. Everything like that. Like it all. Obviously, that matters when it's one-on-one, but it takes on a whole other dimension of complexity when you've got this like three-person party where all of those elements kind of interact with each other, if you know what I mean. So, like it definitely it took me a little while to get used to the battle system. And I think probably what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to go back and like strip out all of my characters because what I basically tried to do was try to balance them. So like each character has kind of the same amount of like, HP. They're all kind of like some of them, they're all sort of strong, but not, and nobody is like unbalanced. Like no one has like a huge amount of mana and the other has a huge amount of strength. I think that's probably what I should be doing actually is to like sort of take their natural like proclivities and then like amplify them and just see how they work together. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. I just didn't realize that was not normally part of this genre.
Yeah, Monster Sanctuary is very unique, and I actually want to do a quick run kind of through I'm not going to do a big history like I usually do, but this is actually a pretty interesting genre, and it's a genre that has some. I have a little bit of a take on why it got so popular. So to take a step back, the monster trainer genre. Now there's a few other games that were floating around during this time that people kind of pin as the beginning point. But as we talked about in our JRPG episode, the original creators of JRPGs were hugely inspired by American RPGs, which obviously all were inspired by Dungeons and Dragons and games like that, right? You have your Ultima, you have your Wizardry, you have your Heroes of Might and Magic. These were kind of like the OGs. This is like the Big Bang. So anyway, the Japanese got their hands on these and they started making their own. And from there came games like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll come back to that. But probably the first game to do the monster training thing was a game called and also this is a mechanic that comes directly out of Dungeons and Dragons. There's games like the game created by Richard Garfield, which people will understand as Magic the Gathering, which is a card game. So these types of games like really influence the Japanese. And in 1987, there was a game that came out in Japan. It later came out to America. It was developed by a company that got big later on called Atlus, ATLUS. And this was a game called Megami Tensei. It came out in 1987. And if you actually go back and play it, it never came to the United States. This version, a later version called Shin Megami Tensei did come. It got ported over and localized for the PS2 later on. But you can now go get a localized version of the original Megami Tensei in 1987, and it's actually really cool. Now, it's a very retro game. It's kind of primitive, but it's like it has. If anybody's ever seen the old school anime movie Dark City, it's very much like that. It's very dark and supernatural, and there's pretty much you go around this cyberpunk city collecting demons and forming alliances with demons, and then you train the demons. So it's an adult game. It's not like a kiddie. It's not Pokemon, right? So that comes out, and that influences one of the Dragon Quest series, Dragon Quest, I can't remember, 4 or 5, which came out in like the early 90s, 91, 92. And in this, it's added the mechanic of collecting monsters to fight for you. And this mechanic went on to influence everybody. Now, when Pokemon dropped in 95 or 96, people think that Pokemon came out and then all of these other knockoff games came out. It's not true. All of these games kind of came out at the same time, right? You have Pokemon from Game Freak in 95 or 96, and then you have Digimon that comes out about like a year later. And then in the same year as Digimon, you get a game called Monster Rancher, which was probably my favorite of the series. So you get Digimon. I'm sure people remember Digimon. And then Monster Rancher. And these games, Digimon was sort of not that far removed from Pokemon. It just had a different theme. It was more of a cyberpunk version of Pokemon. But Monster Rancher was incredibly cool. And this came out for the original PlayStation. And Monster Rancher and Monster Rancher 2 for original PlayStation were probably the coolest games that I can remember. It was like a whole family thing. So the mechanics of this game that were so interesting with the original Monster Rancher were that you could get CDs, and depending for instance, the story of Monster Rancher is there are these ancient monsters that were trapped in these like artifact discs, right? And you have to take them to the shrine to unlock the monster from the old disc tablet. And what it was you could go around your house, find CDs, and depending on the CD, it would unlock a monster. So anybody that played this game ended up scouring for tons of CDs or discs or whatever you could find, and you would put them in, and depending on what it would unlock a certain monster. So me and my whole family got into this, right? It was we would find CD, we would go buy like packs of old CDs or whatever, just find them, and depending on what they were, and this was like before the internet, right? We didn't have the internet yet. So we had like entire notebooks written down of which CDs unlocked which monsters and all this kind of. It was really, really fun. And then you could breed and combine the monsters and train them and go to tournaments. And it was a lot of fun. It was a really, really cool game. They re-released it on the Nintendo Switch a few years ago. And it's still cool, but it doesn't have the mystery to it like it did. Now you have the internet and you can look it up, and obviously you can't put CDs in the Nintendo Switch. What they replaced it with was you entered in your favorite, like you just entered in bands or albums or whatever. You entered in music, artists, and depending on what you entered in, you can unlock monsters. But there's kind of not really any mystery to it because you just look online which unlocks which monster. Right. It wasn't as cool as you're going through like all these like dozens or even like maybe hundreds of CDs trying to find a cool monster, finding mostly just basic mundane things. And then you find one that's a crazy secret monster. That mystery is gone, unfortunately. It's still cool, and it's still cool to go back and play it. But Monster Rancher was dope. Really, really dope game. So that's kind of like the history of it. And since then, there's been a bunch of games that came out. And there is now a really cool resurgence of indie monster trainer games that have come out kind of in the wake of Pokemon dropping the ball. Because after the 90s, Digimon came out. And then obviously there was the whole card game scene that went along with it. You had the Pokemon card game. There's a Digimon card game. You had the Yu-Gi-Oh card game. There's like a lot of card games that kind of emulated this and were built off of the mechanics of Magic the Gathering and Legends of the Five Rings and the original fantasy Plagues and Pestilence card games, strategy fantasy card games. And so there was that scene. But Pokemon really grabbed hold of the monopoly of it. They ran away with it. They were the most popular by far, and Game Freak, the company that develops Pokemon, like formed a monopoly. So they had this entire series, right? You have Pokemon. There was red and yellow and sapphire and diamond or whatever, and it just went on and on and on and on. And I never the Ruby or whatever. I never played that. I played red and they're like the first one, and then I stopped playing it, and I didn't come back to it until I heard that there was a new Pokemon that came out. I got my wife a Nintendo Switch because she loves Mario and those games years ago. And I heard that one of the new Pokemon games that came out was actually pretty cool. So I picked it up. It was Pokemon Shield. It was not this generation, but the one before it. And while I have some critiques of it and everything like that, but overall, I thought it was a pretty fun game. It was a little bit more open world. It's 3D. You run around. There's Pokemon is kind of walking around. There's a few other mechanics. It's a little cartoony and it's made for kids and stuff like that. But overall, I had fun with it. My kids loved it. My kids loved sitting there and playing Pokemon with me. And, we had a lot of fun with Pokemon Shield. So I recently picked up the newest Pokemon, which is Pokemon Violet. Pokemon Violet / Scarlet. I got Pokemon Violet. This sucks. The new Pokemon fucking blows. It is there's this narrative in gaming and literature.
So I know, how new is it? When did it come out?
Like the newest one came out like last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it just came out. Maybe a year and a half ago, something like that. So it just came out. There's this narrative that goes on that everything in the West is paused and everything that comes out of Japan is based and safe and wholesome, and you could go do that. Well, that's not the case. The stuff that's coming out of Japan now is fucking gay as fuck. This new Pokemon game is hideously paused, and it's not explicitly paused. It doesn't say like, oh, well, you can, it's cool to be a tranny or whatever. The Japanese with their pause are much more clever, right? About half of all of the female characters in the game are like 6 feet tall and muscular. The main male character walks like a girl. He looks like a fucking girl. Like everything is it's very like Zoomer pause. You have men that are walking around wearing those weird tight pattern pants and having tranny hairstyles and like anime backpacks. You feel like you're going to a gay furry convention playing this. It's fucking gay. And on top of it, it's junk. It's extremely buggy. The graphics like lag out. It's very laggy. The NPCs walk around at like fucking 2 frames per second. It's abomination. It's horrible. The game is paused. It doesn't work. Don't get it. This game sucks, and I would not let my kids play it with me, but even my sons, they point out, they're like, why does that girl look like a boy? They say it to me. I said nothing to them. They walked in and looked, and like, why does that girl look like a boy? The trainers are all weird and kind of gay. It's just not. And also on top of it, the Pokemon designs themselves are bad. And what I came to find out was the original guys that started a Game Freak that designed the original Pokemon are no longer involved with it. So the old head guys, the old head Japanese team of dudes that made the original Pokemon games and were actually pretty heavily involved with designing Pokemon up until the last game are no longer in it. So a lot of the mechanics are a step backwards. A lot of the stuff that was kind of experimental in the last game that were really cool, they completely got rid of and replaced it with something that's fucking gay. And it's a gay, shitty, buggy, half-assed, not good game. It's not a good game. So, being pissed off about it, I found out that in the wake of the Pokemon games kind of going downhill, there's this resurgence of Monster Trainer games in the indie game department. And a few of the games that have come out that I've played, one of them I didn't like, and we're not going to talk about that one. But 2 of them that I really loved, one of them was called Coromon, which is effectively just an old school knockoff of one of the earlier gens of Pokemon, except like done better. And it's really great game. And the other one is Monster Sanctuary, which I fucking loved. I thought it was great. And it's different, but in a good way. It has, as we mentioned before, you get a team of monsters. You get like a platformer. It's not like a top-down RPG. It has RPG elements, and there are some kind of based themes in it, not like very wholesome themes in it. You start out the game, and the game is like pretty much you choose a monster spirit that is part of your lineage. Like these trainers in the game that train these monsters are part of this like ancient order, this lineage of monster trainers that exist in this this fantasy world, this locked off kind of insulated fantasy world called the Sanctuary. And there's some pretty explicit folkish themes in it. For example, there are quite a few references to old mythologies. There's one point where you have to go find runes, and they're actually legit runes, to go make a prayer and offering to Odin, and he unlocks something for you. And he never comes down. You never talk to him, but you do this ancient ritual and unlock this rune stone, and Odin bestows a gift upon you and unlocks an area, which I thought was actually pretty. And it was very respectful and cool to the lore. It was made by people that were like, they loved old mythology and they wanted to put it in the game, which is what you saw in the old Japanese RPGs. So, when it comes to these monster trainer, okay, before I go on and on any further, Mike, I'm gonna let you hop in here.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, with what you were just saying there about the old mythology and everything, this has always been an important part of video games. And any video game, I think, really that has had staying power, has tapped into some sort of a cultural vein. You know what I mean? This necessarily has to lean on our, shall we say, aboriginal mythological complex. You know, it has to lean on that stuff. Like if you played the old Final Fantasy games, all the summons were based on like mythic creatures. Like you could summon Indra, you could summon Odin, which they called Odin. You could summon Leviathan, all of these mythological creatures and gods and sprites and everything like that. You know, that's an important part of it. A lot of the monsters in that series were named after different mythological characters and everything. Like this is the first place that I ever heard of something like Lich, you know, in Final Fantasy 1. It's one of the elemental bad guys. It's like the big boss of like the Earth Orb or whatever. You know, that kind of stuff that sticks in your mind. This is, I think, a big part of what when I later, because I was always into mythology from a very early age, but when I later sort of came back to it, you know, a lot of it was like rediscovering things like that, like knowing like, oh, I know this word, that was a Final Fantasy thing, right? Well, no, actually it turns out it's a very, very ancient thing. But it taps into something, right? And I think any game that is worth its salt, that like really makes an impact, does this to some degree or another. I mean, obviously, maybe not any game. There's probably not a lot of that going on in the Mario series, for example, but it's certainly an important part of many of them. You know, like you even look at like the development team. I think the video game development house, if I'm guessing correctly, that made this monster sanctuary game was called Moirai. What are the Moirai? Well, they are the Greek fates. So this stuff is always beneath the surface. It's always there in the background. Even when we kind of don't want it to be, even when people, you know, I'm not saying that this development team was paused, but even the ones that are, they just can't get away from that stuff. It's just part of who we are. They kind of have to at least pay lip service to it. And they certainly can't shit on it the way that they would like to. So yeah, the old mythology is an important part of games and culture and everything like that. It was nice to see it treated respectfully in this game. Now, Dave is the one that's going to have to hold forth about the lore of the game and everything, because I just didn't get a chance to get too far into it to learn about it. But even like immediately, just starting out from the beginning, there's all this talk about how monsters are loyal to a family. You choose like a spirit creature that is somehow connected with your bloodline. Like just the mention of a bloodline in a video game in 2020 or whenever this thing came out is like, wow, that's a breath of fresh air right there. So yeah, there's a lot going on in here that I think is quite worthy of note. Yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Dave. I was going to say something about the older Monster Trainer games that you were talking about there, but I think I'll come back to that. But yeah, definitely, there's so much, like it's just so refreshing to see, the ideas that we take seriously in our sphere about like lineage and mythology and like what is ancient and veneration for the past and continuity and everything like that. I don't play a lot of games these days, but I doubt that is a very well-traveled theme today.
Mm-hmm. So you're right. It's that's what I was like taken aback, and I went, I looked up on their Twitter. Here's the deal: is super pause vampire scumbag goblins can't help but like spew their filth on their platforms. You go follow Moirai on Twitter. At least I haven't. Maybe they have, but I haven't seen anything like that. They just kind of tweet about their games, which is fucking based. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Kind of revolutionary, isn't it? Just like talking about fucking games instead of like ideology. It's like it seems like for half of these, development houses, that the ideology is the point, and the game is just a vehicle for that, and that's it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm not sure, where they are. I highly doubt they're like our guys or something like that. But I think that they're people that just want to make good games, and that in itself is like, that's a step in the right direction. That's a step away from what we're dealing with, right? So Monster Sanctuary is a really cool game. It has there's times where you have to go commune, you have to go like make deals with nature spirits. The monsters are sort of like spirits of nature, and the whole point of the game is pretty much you live in this ancient like little dimension that is away from the regular world, right? You are in this world of this magic little sanctuary world where people live with these monster spirits, and there are people from the outside that are trying to come in and subvert it. And what happens is this cult of bad guys, this like weird black magic cult. They wear robes and masks and shit, right? And they sneak in and they start corrupting and perverting and trying to subvert the Monster Sanctuary. And your job is to kick their asses and beat them and chase them out and all this kind of stuff. And along the way, you beat these guys, and you find out that a lot of the cultists were like, I believed in it, but they had me brainwashed, and they kind of just went along with it, kind of stuff. It's actually kind of revealing and refreshing, right? It's like you guys can read what's under the lines there, right? I don't know if they intentionally put that in there, but it's like it's just cool, right? And you go in and you fight it and all this kind of stuff, and then you return. You bring an age of gold, like you bring peace back to the Monster Sanctuary, and it's just fun. It's wholesome. It's a good. I didn't notice anything pause in it at all from my view. So that was about that. This other game that I also played is called Coromon. And Coromon is of similar quality. Now, there's a little bit of multiculturalism in Coromon. It's not obnoxious and glaring. I think one of the things that I was like, I can't really remember all of it, but pretty much the story of Coromon is like the same kind of thing almost. It's there's some bad guys that are up to no good, and these bad guys are aliens from another world, and they want to pretty much conquer your world and change the atmosphere to something that suits them, and all this kind of stuff. And they brought this like evil essence with them, and they are corrupting what are called the Titans. And the Titans are these emanations of this godhead called Koro, and Koro is the creator godhead, and he created all of the Coromon. That's why they're called Coromon. And he brought balance and creation to nature. And your job is to go around to the Titans, which are like the 5 aspects of Koro himself, or Koros, and you have to liberate them and get their essence. And when you combine all of their essence together, you are going to be able to heal the world. Well, you have to, change some shit up, and there's some bumps in the road. But this idea that there's kind of like spiritual theme to it, and this idea that, there's like these like beings on Earth, these like deities, these Titans, it's very mythopoetic in a lot of ways, and it's done very well. And overall, it's just a good ass game. And I really enjoyed playing these because they're, first of all, they're very retro. They're very pixel art. The music in them is very well done. They're very minimalist, as me and Mike harp on a lot with these types of games. And there's a little bit of multiculturalism, modern crap in there, there's no explicit pause. And in fact, quite the opposite. There's some implicit and sometimes explicit mythopoetic folkish themes in them. So the thing is with the Monster Trainer games, this is kind of my take on why these got so popular. And I remember, so Pokemon, I missed out on the card game because when the Pokemon card game sort of became popular, I was in middle school and I was already playing more advanced games. I was already playing Magic the Gathering, right? I was already playing more advanced thing. I was a little bit too old for it. The Pokemon video game on the Game Boy came out and it popped and it got popular right when I was of the age for it to be popular. Pretty much everybody in my school was playing it. It was huge, right? This was the age of where everybody was having. Do you remember those Tamagotchis and shit? Tamagotchis were like every girl had a Tamagotchi, all this kind of stuff. So the reason that I think that these games got so popular, this Monster Trainer game, is because I feel that it is a surrogate activity, a simulation to get back in touch with the ancestral tradition of animal husbandry that has been removed and rendered obsolete by modern capitalism. So a lot of people don't think about this. For us, specifically as Europeans, animal husbandry was essential to our survival, more so in a way than probably any other culture, except for maybe some other like Asian cultures that lived in more mountainous, cold regions. So for especially our Germanic ancestors that lived through the Bronze Age and the Stone Age and going back further, we're talking for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. We had a symbiotic relationship with the animals that we raised. These animals that we raised a lot of times lived in the same buildings that we did. You know what I mean? Obviously, it was probably separated. We didn't like lay in bed with a goat, right? The goat didn't sleep at the foot of the bed, but there's a reason that we get the stereotype that white people kiss their dogs. I hear that all the time. You know, whenever I had a job where I was like, where there was like a lot of blacks or a lot of whatever, they would say, yo, white people kiss their dogs. It's true. We do. We love our dogs. We let our dogs sit on our laps. We love our cats. We love animals in a way that other people don't. We drink milk. We have the LP, the lactase persistence allele that creates enzymes in our stomach through adulthood that allows us to digest lactose. Other peoples don't have that. That's why when they say that most of the world is lactose intolerant. Yeah, most of the world is lactose intolerant. All of Europe is not. Europeans are not lactose intolerant, except for, your one buddy. You're like, oh, wow, you're lactose intolerant. You can't eat cheese. Yeah, that's because we are not lactose intolerant. We can straight up drink milk and it doesn't upset our stomachs, doesn't give us diarrhea, doesn't give us gas or whatever. It's like part of who we are, right? And this ties into animal husbandry being part of our folk consciousness for so long that we have created surrogate activities to fill that role. One of them is this kind of like sometimes toxic love for our pets, which is sometimes pretty weird, right? You get dog moms and cat dads and all this horse shit. That's a surrogate activity to replace animal husbandry that we had. Every single household had for thousands and thousands of years, that we didn't have, and we didn't have these intimate relationships with our animals. Not like, we're fucking our animals or we're like kissing cows on the mouth or anything like that. When I say intimate, I mean like we're right next to each other, and we have to ensure these animals' survivals. And also the relationship with the canine is a very, very European thing, right? There's a reason that the Michael Vick, remember Michael Vick, the football player, when it found out that he was dog fighting?
He's like abusing his dogs and shit like that, wasn't he?
Yeah. You know who fucking demanded his expulsion? White people.
Yeah.
White people were outraged that he was doing this. And the blacks and black people, black fans of football, didn't understand why we were outraged. Because we love animals in a way that other people's don't. And that's because we lived next to them for so long. So fast forward. Pokemon, the reason that it popped, and I'm not saying that other people's didn't play. I'm sure there's plenty of Hispanic and black or Asian. Obviously, it started in Japan. They probably have something similar to us with the animal husbandry. But there's a reason that this game like really rose to its levels of popularity in the West, is because it really filled the niche for a surrogate activity, a simulation of ancient animal husbandry that we had for thousands of years, that is literally just encoded into our DNA, into our folk soul. So these kids were like, fuck, this is something that is part of me, is to take care of these animals, these monsters, and to raise them and train them. And on top of it, it had strategy to it. We've talked about this over and over again. Strategy gaming is something that's not new. There's a reason that when you go and you look at guys that are playing these ridiculous 4X strategy games, all white dudes. White dudes. Stellaris, fucking whatever else is out there. You guys know what I'm talking about. These like map games that are just map and resource management. I think they're boring as fuck. But it is 1000% a white guy thing, because it has been a white guy thing since the beginning of time. The Romans playing tabula. Dude, this fucking Taffel with the Norse. Fucking strategy wargaming has forever been a thing. Little wars and miniature gaming in the Victorian era. This is who we are. So it like hit all the right notes for like white kids to become obsessed with Pokemon. Yeah.
And it's also a kind of, you're right, it definitely this strategy gaming thing, this very hyper autistically, like what we think of as autism, which is really just like the rational, I hesitate to say male brain, because I actually kind of reject the male brain autism hypothesis. But it's definitely got a side of, there's something there that like, that white people are, it speaks to us, and we do it very well. The only other people who do it, I think, just about as well are the Japanese. Somehow we have this like crazy reflex of like, whites, like Europeans and Japanese just seem to like understand each other in some very deep ways. But yeah, like it's like if you look at the there's that meme of like, this is what weaponized autism looks like, and it's just like a Roman phalanx. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like the most mathematical, rationalistic, very like very ordered way to conduct battle, and of course it was also just savagely effective as well. But I think that your idea of that monster trainer games are sort of they scratch a deep folkish itch that we haven't been able to really get for at least since industrialization, and that is animal husbandry. I think that's actually quite an incisive take, because I have this theory that I think explains quite a lot, actually. And guys who longtime listeners to Culture Dads and people who have followed me on the Imperium Substack will have an idea of what I mean when I say the Odinic-Tiric distinction. Guys who don't, we did a whole episode on this on Culture Dads, so go back and have a listen to that before going forward with what I'm about to say. I mean, the TLDR really is that the Odinic, I mean, this is basically a paradigm that breaks down who we are as peoples, that we can sort of be sorted into these categories. Some of us are more Odinic than others. Some, some like folk groups, like, the Germanics are more Odinic than the Italics, who are more Tiric. And what I mean by these categories fundamentally is that, to boil it down way too far, is that the Odinic is essentially the great man that like comes and sweeps away all convention, and the Tiric is the traditionalist that enshrines tradition. And one of the important parts of that is that the Tiric enshrines the last Odinic, so the Odinic kind of rules over him. Anyway, the theory that I have here is that it is the hunter-gatherer elements in our makeup, even our genetic makeup, that give us the Odinic fundamentally, and which is why you can see some very Odinic elements in other peoples that were descended from hunter-gatherers, such as the Mongols and the Northeast Eurasians, such as the Japanese themselves. Those are very Odinic peoples, and it's not an accident that they had hunter-gatherer lifestyles for a long time. And so it is within the European peoples that the most Odinic are the ones that have the most hunter-gatherer. It's astounding. You can actually break it down by like genetic mapping, and it's very, very clear. And so it is with the Tiric. The Tiric, on the other hand, it descends from the Neolithic farmers, essentially. So basically the peoples who had more farming DNA are the ones that are more traditionalist, more Tiric, more conventional, more ritualistic. Think, for example, of the Italians, right? They are very, very conventional. We went through all this on that episode, so go back and listen to it. Basically, what I'm saying here is that it's the farmers that engage in animal husbandry for the most part. I mean, yes, hunter-gatherers obviously don't, but there are some semi-nomadic, like the Indo-Europeans themselves, semi-nomadic in that they were animal husbanders, but also farmers to some extent. It's the farmer aspect of it that really gives us the that's the part that the animal husbandry side, that's the itch that needs to be scratched. It comes from that side, the Tiric side. And it's that side, as I mentioned, that gives us the emphasis on things like lineage, emphasis on things like territorialization, which is just a fancy word for blood and soil, basically. It's the Tiric that is nationalistic in that way, that is attached to a place. It's also attached to a folk that, that it's like, if you read the Ancient City, that is the Tiric right there. It's the perfect exemplar of that. The Tiric is also very conventional. It's very bound up with ritual, and it's bound up with tradition. Tradition is the name of the game for the Tiric. So what these monster taming games are, like, this is no substitute for tradition, obviously, but it's doing something for us. I agree with you, Dave. Now that you've said that, I think it actually brings things quite a bit into focus. That what these monster taming games are doing is they're giving us something that we kind of have lost and has been taken from us, which is the idea of building up a tradition, building up a folk group, and starting from the bottom and just kind of like building something up from nothing that we have lost, right? Because, liberalism fundamentally is basically amnesia, the ideology, right? It's a new fresh start every generation, fresh start every day. It's the year zero ideology where you can't build up a tradition. You can't build up anything. You can't build up a character. You can't build up yourself. This is what liberalism basically is. And these games kind of give us something in a very sort of not obvious way. They give us something that we're kind of missing, that we crave, right? And this is when it gets melded with other elements that are pretty based and pretty traditionalist, like you see in this game, Monster Sanctuary. It gives you something pretty special, which is, I think, why I really like this game, just sort of on a very, very intuitive level, on a gut level. I just liked it immediately, right? It's got all kinds of elements in there that are traditionalists, that are ancient, that are venerable, right? There's even just like a line in there, like right off the bat, that somebody says something like, "Some say that the outcome of the battle is decided before it even begins," right? Like that just comes straight out of Sun Tzu, right? Art of War. Mm. So the guys who developed this game were clearly, they're fans of this kind of stuff, right? And the idea of, in this Monster Trainer game, you've got these grades of monster trainers. You start out as, and I don't remember what any of them are called, but you start out as a novice or a rookie, and then there's all these grades, intermediary, and then you get up to, the expert monster trainer. And that this is basically the idea of the game. This is the intention of what you're supposed to do. And another element in here that is kind of like anti-liberal in some ways is the elemental aspect of the game. Right? Like some monsters are susceptible to wind, others to fire, water, air, whatever it is. There's a kind of essentialism there, right? There's just something that cannot be changed. Your character, no matter what, you can give them buffs, debuffs, you can give them equipment, you can give them all these things to sort of change their basic stats, but they will always be susceptible to this and that element. There's a kind of essentialism there that you can't change, that kind of grates against the shit lib, right? Because the shit lib wants to be able, he's self-legislating. He wants to be able to completely make himself up from the ground up. He wants to be able to say, "I'm a woman today. Tomorrow I'm this like elfish, metrosexual, pansexual, dwarf, whatever." He wants to be able to remake himself at a whim. But you just can't do that, obviously. And in this game, there are elements of that as well. And that's got to hurt, which is kind of cool. And there's also elements of the deep past as well in this game. The Keeper's Sanctuary has existed for centuries, and it is a sanctuary. It's a stronghold. It's kind of like, it's like the church, that the idea that in the Middle Ages, once you've reached the church and you're touching the church wall, that you're no longer allowed to be killed, right? It is a sanctuary. It's the place that you retreat to, and it's been there for ages, and it's got this history, and it's got a lineage, and it's venerable, and it's all these things. And I think even just the idea, and this is it goes beyond Monster Sanctuary, the idea of stat maxing is kind of corrosive in some ways to liberalism, because it means that you can kind of work on yourself and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. This is something that you'll hear, like anytime you hear somebody yelling about that and crying about pull yourself up by your bootstraps, usually what it means is they're basically a communist. And like people believe that systems and the environment basically governs who they are, and that human will counts for nothing, and that basically it's the system. So that's why the left always has systemic critiques of everything, is it basically sort of outsources agency to the environment. It's not your fault that you're ugly and stupid and disgusting and weird, it's nature's fault. So the idea that you can build yourself up, that of self-improvement in general, is basically corrosive to these people's self-image. It's corrosive to their worldview, and it's great that we have these things in these games, because it just basically is, it's the kind of thing that completely grates against everything that they stand for. And, you know, even though video games are sort of the province, like, you know, video game fandom is very, very woke, but there's always these things that they can never get away from. And it's got to kind of stick in their craw a little bit. It's always there. It's part of what makes games fun, and they'll never get rid of it. So it's just really cool. It's really cool to see that in this game, married to all these other traditional elements. So yeah, it's a real winner, I think.
Hell yeah. Awesome. So yeah, that's you know, kind of my overview of Monster Trainer games. Mr. Mike, we're over an hour. We're at an hour 15. You want to keep going, or you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think we could wrap that up, unless you've got some more that you want to say about it, and more you want to talk about the history of these things. Well, I guess we went into the history and everything like that. It's just, yeah, it's a development out of, actually, when I was playing this game, it reminded me a little bit of the job system from Final Fantasies 3 and 5. It seemed like it was kind of an extension of the job system. It's kind of like with these games, for guys who have never played Final Fantasy, you choose your party, and each character has a like a class. So you might have like a fighter, or you might have like a mage, or a thief, or a geomancer, or a dragoon, or a bard, or something like that. And they all have their different stats and abilities and everything. And part of what makes like the innovation from Final Fantasy 1, which is where this all started, is that your party isn't the same every time. You can choose different combinations, and it's the combinations that make it really interesting. And it seemed to me that monster training games, especially this one that has a party element to it, kind of are hearkening back to that. So it's a sort of like reflex of this very, very old idea in video games, the idea of the party system, the idea of the job system, sort of coming back and have another go at it. So it's really cool to see that. It's very nostalgic with the pixel art and everything like that. Man, this game could have easily been like a smash hit on the Super Nintendo or something. So it's very nostalgic for me. It's really cool. I'd recommend it to anybody. I think it was a great choice of game to play.
Hell yeah. I'm so happy you like that. That's because I think, you know, and we were talking about this before, right? Kind of when we first started. I think that there are too many, we talk about this all the time, like the black pill, the incessant black pill, the cycles of black pilling. And I think that it is to be honest, I'm going to straight up, this might piss some people off or whatever, but I think that it is kind of like this back and forth toxic relationship between the addiction to Doom and the Doom peddlers, right? You have like these content creators that would probably go and make a little bit different content, but they're guided by their engagement statistics. And let me tell you, I never post Doom stuff. I constantly just bleed subscribers. Well, especially on Telegram. I just constantly bleed subscribe. Like I'll post like some sort of meme or something that has to do with you know, the doom of today, and it goes viral, and then I get a whole like few hundred new subscribers, and then they stick around, and then they don't want to see what I'm talking about, which is what I'm working on. Sometimes I'll say something funny, sometimes I'll talk about spirituality, I'll promote music, or I just don't want to do that anymore. And, you know, I think that a lot of those guys, they're looking for that. They're addicted to it. And if you don't give it to them, they're not going to fuck with you. They don't even want to. They don't want praxis. They don't want action. They don't want art. They don't want that. They want free doom pilling content forever. That's the only thing that they want, because it gives them comfort. And I'll tell you, there's been a few times I've made posts saying like, hey, this Doom stuff, just not only is it bad for you, it's just not true. Some of it is just not true.
Yeah.
And it's almost like telling an alcoholic to stop drinking, or telling a pothead that he smokes too much pot, or a porn addict that porn is bad for them. Literally how they act. Excuses, justifications, anger, insults, spurg, no rationality. It's like this demon inside them is thirsts for this content. And to try to take that away from them is to take away something that they're addicted to. Really, really sad. And I think that what happens is when a lot of these people start crowding around, content creators, they're like, oh man, my engagement's going up and up and up and up and up. And they're like, I have to keep making this content or people are going to stop watching me. And then they get exposed to this content, searching for new, unique black billing content. And then over time, it rots their brain out and they become darker and more twisted over time, and further away from reality, and further away from the truth, and further away from good. You know what I mean? I've seen there are people, I'm not going to name names, that are kind of like bigger in the sphere, and I've known them for years. I've interacted with them for years, and they've gotten a lot bigger now than they were some years back. And I remember some years back, I knew them and they were fun and interesting and smart and all this. And I'm not saying they're not fun and interesting, smart anymore, but there's certainly a darker quality to who they are now. They're meaner. They're not the same. You know what I mean? And also, I'll tell you this: a lot of guys that go real hard with the doom pill content, misfortune tends to follow them. It's just the way that it is. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why. It's a spiritual thing.
Yeah.
But, I'm going to tell you guys out there listening right now, you guys that are rewarding content creators for creating doom pilling content that you want for free, you are slowly torturing these people. You are abusing them. You are forcing them to react to the content engagement. And I'm not saying that these guys aren't like some of these guys are like drug dealers with this, that they're naturally like that. And they know that it gets engagement. They know that it gets them popular, and they know that that's the boat to ride down the stream, and they like it. And they don't give a fuck about you. But some of these folks at one point when they started, they cared about the truth and they cared about what was good. And they're now it fucks them in the head, dude. I'm telling you this as a guy that did this. I did that for years. And I walked away from it. I had a big platform, much bigger than I have now. I walked away from it because it was fucking rotting out my soul. To go and look up fucking conspiracy theories with child molesters, and to over and over and over and over and over watch videos where like white girls are getting beaten to death and children are being abducted and hordes of the third world jumping over fences and like all of the above over and over and over again fucked me up, dude. I started being mean to people in real life. I started to get paranoid. It blackened my heart and blackened my soul. And I'm not saying that we need to ignore that and pretend that it's not happening. Not at all what I'm talking about. Human beings are not built to digest that level of trauma. By giving yourself this like constant feed of doom. More doom than is actually going on. And like in France, it's going on real bad right now. Dude, I'm the first guy. Dude, the French, if you're French and you're listening to this, dog, you got to kick them motherfuckers out. It's time to kick them motherfuckers out. Right? That's it, period. End of the day. It's time to go fight for you. But for those of us that are in these other countries that we're in these neighborhoods where nothing happens, everybody's sort of still kind of normal and everything's mostly still normal. And then we go in fucking line and watch this shit. And that ain't healthy, dude. It rots you out. Stop doing it and stop pressuring these content creators to do it. Because what happens is they go nuts. They get further and further more extreme. They trash their lives and they become broken shells of themselves. And eventually they stop creating meaningful stuff or they quit and walk away. You know what I mean? You guys want these people that a lot of these guys, you guys been following them for years and years. You really like these guys. No, you got to care about them. Reward them for creating content that isn't just fucking cycles of misery and doom. For real, for real.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, folks. Appreciate all you guys tuning in to this episode of Culture Dad's Age of Sword Cassette. If you're not signed up already, make sure to go over to imperiumpress.org/podcast and go get signed up to the Gumroad. Lots of great perks, hardback books, the Western Canon series, all kinds of great stuff over there. You got to get signed up and help support Imperium Press so they can pursue their destiny and blossoming into becoming the institution that they were born to be, so they may save the Western canon from those who wish to erase it. If you want to check out what I'm doing, go over to thebizarrearchives.com and buy books. Guys, The Bizarre Archives, issue 5 is nigh. A malignant mag of blasphemous proportions. Sci-fi, cosmic horror, sword and sorcery, everything, weirdness is in there. Plus comics. There's lots of new features in Bizarre Archives 5. It's a big boy, big thick boy. Coming out very soon. Any day now. So stay tuned for that. Follow us on Twitter and Telegram @The Bizarre Archives. And I'll see you guys next time here on Culture Dads 8.